will get better. Tomorrow's supposed to be 64 and sunny, so maybe we can get outside a little bit. This is part 4 of our Through the Eyes of a Champion series. In episode 27, we spoke with University of Kentucky and New Orleans Pelican superstar Darius Miller. Darius gave us some insight on what being a professional was like and what being able to obtain championships at every level is like. Tonight, we will be joined by soon-to-be OHSAA Hall of Famer Coach Jerry Underwood. Coach Underwood will chat with us tonight about his experience being at Georgetown High School and being fortunate enough to win a state championship, but also being part of some very good teams prior to that team's championship. Coach Underwood will walk us through the process that Georgetown took to get to that 07 state championship and what had to happen before that happened. So a lot of times people think that championships are built just in that one day or in a specific season that you're in, and that's not actually the case. So Coach Underwood will talk to us about that. We also will talk to Coach Underwood about how he was able to ring in a group of kids that had played for another individual their whole lives and get them to buy into the system that he was selling. This episode 28 is brought to you by Anchor.fm and Orab Sports Complex. All syndications of this podcast and podcasts before this one can be heard at the following: Anchor.fm, CastBox, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Breaker Radio, Spotify, Google Podcast, and Apple Podcast. Let's kick off the show. Through the Eyes of a Champion, episode 28. Again, I'm your host, the Sports Guru. This week, in our Through the Eyes of a Champion series, we were able to catch up with Jay Chadwell, LJ Cowherd, Darius Miller, and Coach Kelly Wells. Tonight, we will have another special and phenomenal guest, a man who is very important to me in terms of mentorship, and a man that has been down the road, traveled, and done a great job along the way. In those episodes, each of them spoke to us about the importance of culture, hard work, dedication, and commitment. Also, they spoke of sacrifice and how each component of a team has to be put in place in terms of individual accolades being set aside to achieve the overall goal of accomplishing that championship dream. I would like to welcome our guest tonight, a man who has spent his entire coaching career in one location, a man that has built and sustained a powerhouse at Georgetown High School, a man that has amassed over 326 wins against only 129 losses during his 20-year high school coaching career. He's won 4 sectional titles, 11 league titles, a district title, a regional title, and ultimately a state title in 2007. A Hall of Fame selection at Georgetown High School, along with a Hall of Fame selection through the Brown County Hall of Fame, and future OSAA Hall of Famer inductee. A terrific educator, now a phenomenal administrator, a West Carter High School graduate, a Morehead State University graduate. Not only did he just graduate from the University of Morehead State University, he also played football while he was there, and a man that I've gotten to know and respect well and appreciate for what he brings to the youth of our community, Coach Jerry Underwood. Coach, how are you?
I'm great, Jason. How are you?
I'm well. How's that quarantine life treating you?
Quarantine life is okay. It's probably making me do things I probably shouldn't do, but nonetheless, I'm surviving.
Well, the key is that you're surviving. First off, I want to go back to West Carter High School and the mountains of Kentucky and how impactful that was to your ultimate goal of wanting to be an educator, wanting to give back, and wanting to be involved in sports.
Oh, wow. That goes back to, basically at the time in which I grew up, basketball was king in Kentucky, and ultimately it still is. So everybody had dreams of growing up and playing basketball, playing for the University of Kentucky, and doing something special when you're in high school, making it to the state tournament or have an opportunity to win. It was just, we didn't really know any different. That's what we were supposed to do. And so, I had a passion for that. I really had a lot of respect for the coaches and players that I played with and played for. And so, I got so much enjoyment out of it. I just realized that one day that's something I wanted to continue to do.
A lot of times I don't think people speak enough. People become successful and in your case, move away from home and your hometown and what you know and what you grew up around and what you're used to. And I don't think enough appreciation or enough homage is paid back to the place that we come from. And I know that Ripley was a very important place for me. And I know when I go to West Carter, when I was coaching at Mason County, we would go there and I would always ask, do you know Coach Underwood? And I'd always run into some people that knew who you were. So your impact was felt there as well. Now you're at Morehead State. What did MSU do for you in terms of growing up? You're playing football and you're away from home and it's time for Jerry Underwood to figure out who Jerry Underwood is. How was that Morehead State experience?
Morehead State experience was great. I will say that even when I was in high school, I knew that I wanted to be a teacher and I wanted to coach and I wanted to make the same impact on other kids that was made on me myself, because I enjoyed being around kids. I enjoyed being around the sport. I enjoyed seeing other people succeed and being part of that. And so, I played 1 year of football in high school. I was fortunate that the year that I did play, I had a really good year. So I had a lot of people that were, interested and kind of wanted me to come out. I hadn't played long enough for them to say, hey, we want to give you full ride, but you've done well for the year you played, so come on out. So, I went to Morehead with a little bit of an idea of thinking, well, I'll just see if I would want to continue to play. And I enjoyed it, but I will say it wasn't my passion. I enjoyed it. I liked it. It was really fun. And I think if I probably would have played longer, I might have felt different. But I knew ultimately where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. Basketball was my passion. It's what I always wanted to do. And I just realized that once I got there, I got a year of football in, and I thought, you know what? I could stay here longer than I probably want to, but if I just focus on, getting through my classes and getting things finished, what needs to be done, get my degree so I can go ahead and get started in the career in which I wanted to do.
So you get done at Morehead and you land a job at Georgetown. Was that your first job?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I wasn't real familiar with that area of Ohio. I've always went to Reds games when I was young, and Bengals games when I was young. I probably went by there a million times, but I still really it didn't register with me where that was. So I did see it, and it just so happened that a physical education position came open and an opportunity to coach JV basketball at the time, and I thought, okay, it's a great place to start. It's a good stepping stone. I'll stay here for a couple of years and then, get my feet wet and learn a few things and then move on to somewhere else.
Yeah, joke's on you, huh?
Yeah, I tell people that all the time. And then, 32 years later, I'm still there. So it's been great, though. I have absolutely nothing but great things to say about the whole area. Basketball, I think in Southern Ohio it's king there because football is really not prevalent. But I've gained a lot of respect for all the teams and all the coaches and basketball in general, and I had no reason to go anywhere else because I felt like what I really ultimately wanted to accomplish, I could do there.
So you land the job at Georgetown, and within your first couple years, you're not much older than a group of guys that came through there that people don't really talk about. People talk about a player on that team, but there was a team in 1990 at Georgetown that was absolutely loaded with NBA star Brian Grant, point guard Jermaine Marshall, wing Jason Linkus, another wing Rob Walters, and then there was a group of young guys coming up that you would ultimately coach at the varsity level, with that being Brandon Grant and that group. At that point, people from Kentucky always talk about how much better Kentucky basketball is than Ohio. And I'm not going to go in depth and say that it's better, but something that people don't understand a lot. People are always like, well, that's stupid that Ohio has one state tournament. Ohio has over 1,000 high schools. Kentucky has 380 or something. So there's no comparison in the amount of schools within the states. But for you being a Kentucky guy where basketball was king and coming to Ohio, and then within a couple of years of being a teacher and a coach, this is the group that you get a chance to impact. How was that?
Well, when I first got there, and I wasn't totally aware of what was there and what was in front of us and the talent, but yeah, I was ultimately impressed with the amount of talent that was there. Like you had said, there were a lot of good players coming through with a lot of talent. I has to ask myself this question all the time: what significantly is there different? And I still just think that ultimately is that I still just believe that when kids are born into families and being raised, that basketball is the thing that you're supposed to do, and supposed to want to do, and win a state championship. When I was in the third grade, I just remember we got to start playing basketball in the third grade, organized in elementary all the way through. Those are the things we thought about the whole time. And so right. I think that piece is probably missing a little bit. And so the amount of importance there is to that is not as, in depth as possible. But ultimately, as talent goes, I can tell you there is a huge abundance of talent in the state of Ohio. They probably have, more talented athletes than just about any other state in the United States. So as far as athleticism, I can tell you that there is no difference, and probably in some aspects, about more.
So when you were, did you know, like at that time, that Brian Grant had the potential to be an NBA player or be a Division I caliber athlete, or, how was that experience like, watching him evolve to what he was from not playing the 1 year to coming back and evolving to being recruited by NAIA schools to ultimately being recruited by Xavier and some other, some of the better schools in the country? How neat was that experience?
Oh, it was awesome because, that would have been my second year there, and that's when Tim Chadwell was the head coach. My second year at JV there, Tim took over the helm there. And, by the way, Tim and I had, a great relationship. He was my mentor, and, I got to learn a lot from him because he was at Wilmington College at the time and was coaching there. So, he came with more of a college philosophy of coaching kids, which kind of fit that group that he ended up getting. So there was a lot of pluses to that. As far as Brian goes, Brian wasn't 6'8" at the time. He might have been 6'6", maybe, and maybe 180, 190 pounds soaking wet. So, but you could see he had that potential. He had the athletic ability, and and he worked hard. He had a hell of a work ethic his senior year, and I think that turned the tables for him. I think that he came back and played with a vengeance and wanted to prove to people that he could do something special. And lo and behold, he did, you know, and I know there were a lot of schools, you know, NAI schools that were recruiting him. I think the Division I schools are questioning the fact of, you know, is this kid talented enough to come in and make an impact? And I just remember Xavier was like, you know, maybe we can get him, and then maybe his junior and senior year he could make a difference for us. And he changed their minds real quick because they didn't realize they only saw the brine from the outside. They didn't see the brine from the inside.
Right.
When they decided to give him a scholarship, he took it, ran. You know, he worked his butt off and got in the weight room and put on weight, and you know, the rest is history. He became one of the greatest players at Xavier University, and not, you know, separation of great teams and great players is not the fact that they've got talent. It's the fact that they've got talent and they want to work hard and they have a passion for the sport and they want to improve and make themselves better. And that goes to prove and show you that it's not always just talent. And that's the hard thing to figure out with kids. You know, you probably know many kids with a lot of talent over the years, but because of their attitude and lack of work ethic and not wanting to put in the time and didn't have a passion for it, that was it. That was the end.
Right.
So it is a huge combination. You know, so many times kids with talent take it easy and cruise.
Right. Well,
great ones that have talent, they find another gear and they work their butt off and they become great.
Something that I've figured out over the years is the ones that cruise always run out of levels to cruise at. So if you cruise through high school, if you're a cruiser, you can cruise through high school and be good enough to get to college, but you'll cruise your way right out of a scholarship. If you cruise your way through college and you're lucky enough to play in the NBA or in Europe, you'll cruise your way out of a contract. Cruisers cruise their way into the next phase or next step, and they cruise their way right out of it. So let's stay in 1990, and let's go to the district finals against Houston. And that game is the beginning of a lot of history between Georgetown High School and Houston. Let's talk about that game that night, and could you ever foresee that you would have 3 or 4 district championship games against Houston over the next 30 years?
No, I really wouldn't have, and especially the way it ended, but we'll get to that. But, you know, Houston was one of those teams. They were a great team. I mean, they weren't overly talented, played hard, played smart. Any tournament run, you know, you have to play well in every single game because you're not playing anybody that you can have a bad game and lose.
Mm-hmm.
You're just going to lose. You're not going to win.
Mm-hmm.
And we obviously didn't shoot the ball very well that night. We didn't shoot it very well at all. You know, they were double, triple teaming Brian inside every time he caught it. And not saying they didn't foul him every time he caught it, but nonetheless, they weren't blowing a whistle. So with that said, they win. It's that simple. When you get in the tournament, you have to play at a high level and you have to play well enough. You have to play well every game. And that's why, you know, you see all these great teams that have great seasons and do all that, and they get in a tournament. Next thing you know, they're gone because they couldn't maintain that ability to play at a high level the whole time.
Well, and something else that has to happen is guys have to – something that happened with your 2007 team, and we'll get into that way down the road here, but guys have to pick up the slack. You know what I mean? Guys have to pick up the slack, and other guys have to pick up where guys let off and or not able to get on. And that's one thing that I try to explain to kids. The best player on your team is the best player on your team. It's okay for you to see him as the best player on your team, as a teammate. But you as an individual have to continue to grind and have to continue to push to reach your maximum potential, not for the benefit of how good the next game may be, or not for the benefit of are you going to be 1,000-point scorer, an all-state player, but for the benefit of that night when another coach has prepared and you know, done everything that they have to do to make sure that their team is ready to beat you, that's always going to involve slowing down your best player. And are you ready to step up? That's where, as coaches, we use the mantra, next man up. And, sometimes that just doesn't happen. Now you get your opportunity to be a head coach and you have some talent, but you're in Division III. How hard was that Division III sectional through those years, the late 90s and early 2000s?
Oh, my. Loaded. There was no weak teams. I mean, that's the thing. And I take away from Kentucky to Ohio, there's so many more teams, and there's so many more teams that have, a lot of talent, that just to get out of your sectional is a huge accomplishment, because you have to win 3 games there before you can even get to a district.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was new to me. We have a district and a regional in Kentucky, and you only had to win 1 game in your district to get to the regional, and then win 3 regional games, and you're in the state tournament. I know that sounds easy, and it's not, but it sure is a lot less games to have to play well to win, to get there. And so, and I've always said, if you're good enough to win your sectional in Cincinnati, the district was a step down, in my opinion. I'll be honest, and I don't mean that to be
I agree.
To anybody in Dayton or anybody above, because they've had great teams and great moments. But I just felt like, I don't want to say that we were better, but I would say this: if we're good enough to win a sectional in Cincinnati, we're certainly good enough to win the district game at the next level. So I always felt confident that our teams were capable of doing that. They were tough enough. They worked hard enough. I always wanted the game to feel easier than practice.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I tried my best to make that happen.
96, if you go back to 96, you had a really good team. I think you guys may have finished the season 17-3 or 16-4. You get a top 5 seed in the sectional, and we came to your place and had a really close game during the regular season, and Eastern beat us twice in the regular season. And Eastern was knocked off in the first round of the sectional. You guys were the 3 or 4 seed and, got knocked off in the sectional. We got lucky. The ball bounced our way a couple games. And like you say, we got lucky. But to win those 3 games at Sycamore, once we got the UD to Clinton Massey, and this is no knock against Clinton Massey, they were a really good team. But like you say, it wasn't the first 3 games of the sectional. It's just not the same.
No, it isn't.
So let's switch gears here. And a lot of people don't know this, and a lot of younger Georgetown fans don't know this, but Georgetown was in the Southern Hills League in the early 90s. What made that geographical switch for them to go to the SBAAC and get out of the Southern Hills League? And how was that transition and that adjustment with you being the head coach when that took place?
Yeah, I think my first year was our last year in the Southern Hills League. And so, and I know that Georgetown has been in the SHL for forever. I don't know how long, but our switch over to the SBAAC was 2 reasons, twofold. And as a coach, I can tell you that I understand the move, because, and that's no, once again, disrespect by anybody in the Southern Hills League, because I can tell you that I think the Southern Hills League from top to bottom is always strong and very competitive, and we always had great games there. But you have to look at what's best for our kids, and not that the competition from the SHL wasn't the best for our kids, but what we didn't get was respect from, at the time, the Cincinnati Enquirer or any of the teams that was down there, that we had to go to a tournament draw in Cincinnati every year. And because we played in the SHL, I don't think that we got what we deserved most of the time when we went to the tournament draw. And even teams that we had beaten badly, there just was that lack of respect. And just because we didn't go that way to play in our league, and we wasn't getting any recognition from any of the newspapers or any of the media, we wanted our kids to have more of that. And they deserved more of that. Mm-hmm. And that's not anybody's fault other than the fact that that's just as far as the paper went to cover, and we were also incorporating new sports. At the time, the SBAC had soccer. The SHL didn't have it at the time. We did as a school, as an independent with the soccer team, and we wanted to get our school in a soccer league. And so there was a lot of things that came into play at that time. But I can say that, I felt like we got better recognition even from schools outside the SBAC, from the schools from the CHL, whoever else was down there when tournament time came, just because we switched leagues. Now, does that make it right? No. But was that beneficial for us as far as getting in the tournament? Yes.
I've always said that Ripley needs to go Southeast District or be in a Cincinnati league. And I don't know what league that would be. I don't know if it would be the SBAC, because from Ripley, like East Clinton would be a haul. And there are a lot of schools that are in the small division of the SBAC that would be far. But now that Ripley has went Division IV, in the last 3 years since I've been the head coach over at Felicity, Ripley's been the 1 seed, the 2 seed, and the 3 seed. So they've had a top 3 seed each of those years. But prior to going D4, Ripley never had a seed better than a 7 or 8. Even the years when 04, when they were really good, they were a 9 seed or something. In 01, they were in a 10 seed. Like, they always get, like you say, they always have a high seed because of the conference that they play in. And, you have to schedule you have to make your schedule beneficial to making tournament runs. And so it makes sense what you're saying, because how you were able to make your schedule tournament run worthy was getting in a different conference. Because to the coaches in Cincinnati, playing Southeast District teams 14 games out of the year are not tournament run worthy schedules. And whether it be right, wrong, or indifference, that's the fact. That's how they see it. They just don't give respect to the teams out here that play in other leagues.
They don't. And the only thing you can do to remedy that is go beat them. So you go beat them, and it holds coaches accountable. If they want to vote against you in a tournament draw, you can remember that for next year when you play them in the league, and make sure that they understand that, fair is fair. Give us what we deserve. Before that, they could not vote for you and never see you again until the tournament the next year. But playing in a league that way, they know they're going to see you at least twice, maybe 3 times in a year. So I think that's helpful too.
Because Eastern made the move. They didn't change leagues, but they changed districts, which was beneficial for them, because that's, they too got no respect in sectional voting in Cincinnati, just based solely on the fact that they played in the Southern Hills League. They go Southeast, they play in a Southeast League, and their voting and stuff goes a little bit different than ours. They don't do the voting; they do the seeding. You vote for their seed, and then you play the one. There's 8 teams. The one plays the 8, so on and so forth. You don't get to pick your line like you do in the Southwest District. Tell us a little bit about your first tournament run as a head coach in 1998. You had JYD, the Junkyard Dog, Jarrett Young.
Yes.
One of the players on that team that doesn't get enough mention, as people talk about that being one of Georgetown's better teams in terms of a tournament run, is Toby Cowhall. Toby Cowhall was a very, very, very good defensive player. He could score a little bit, but that team was unbelievable to me, because I don't know how you did with so much with so little. So tell us a little bit about that team.
That was a typical, in my opinion, in my run, one of the better teams to coach, because they played so hard. We were always undersized, undermatched physically, but man, they had the heart of a lion. We could D up with anybody, but I think the biggest thing is they were very cohesive, and that's a huge key to any good team. Everybody knew what their roles were, and they did them to the best. So big key to any time in the role, they take it serious, and they know that it's as important as any other. And it's a phenomenal year. We went down to our sectional tournament. I don't know. We may have been a third, fourth, sixth seed. I'm not really sure. I know at that time North College Hill was 1 seed, and they had maybe lost 1 game if they had lost any.
With Jen Jones and Perry Coleman.
Yeah, and they had played Eastern the night before we played them and beat them by like 25 or 30. And we had struggled with Eastern that year when we were playing them. And so I'm thinking we got our hands full, and obviously we did, but probably one of the best played games I've been a part of, and I was really fortunate. But it was one of those Hoosier moments. I felt like, the only advantage we had is that our kids wanted to win more than the other team, because we had more talent. We weren't close overall. As far as wins, they lost 1 game. If they had lost any at that time, they had a coach that had been there for 30 years and had all the experience in the world. And it's just one of those things, you had to be there to see it. I still today can't tell you how exactly it all happened. It just did. But we had some great kids, great players, played hard, played with passion, and they wanted to win it, and they did. And so that was definitely one of my probably top 5 wins ever.
It makes it a little easier when you got a guy that you can just say, go get me a bucket. You know what I mean? Like, JYD was a bucket. He could score. He led the city in scoring that year at 20.
Yeah, I think it's at 27.
27 and a half, and then McMonagle wasn't far behind him from New Richmond with 26 something, and then there was a plethora of other people there, that were around 25 points a game. But Jarrett could score, and his nickname is Shotgun, and his nickname is Shotgun for a reason. But I tell people all the time, training and working out nowadays is not what it is, different than it used to be. Like back then, there was no Vertimax, and there were strength shoes. There was no gun. It was a shoot away. And so the training was different then. But in terms of workouts at that time, Jarrett worked out. And we'll get into talking to Jimmy here in a bit, but Jarrett worked out. His workouts were probably as good as anybody knew how to work out at that time.
He did, and he put a lot of time in. He did go to training to make himself quicker and faster and stronger. And but ultimately, I think the difference between then and now too is that you have to put in the specialized programs to get them to go out and work and improve, where back then it was still, you were mainly on your own. You were going out to teams down there at Ripley, playing against older guys and trying to prove yourself. And there's no better way to improve your game than to just be playing every day and have the passion and the willpower to want to do it, and not have to have all these leagues and all these games and all these things to put kids into so that they're out there getting it done.
So
it's a big difference. It's a big shift,
You're building now. Okay, so you've got your sectional championship. One of the things that people don't know, your 1996 team was also loaded. You had Mike Jennings, you had Eric Weiss, you had Jarrett, you had kids coming off the bench that were pretty good. Christian Graham was a pretty good player. Eric Jones was a scrappy player. That group, Matt Mawat he got much better after high school, but he was still 6'3", 6'4". He was a talented player. You had a lot of pieces, and it just seemed like even though those guys were really good friends, they just couldn't gel to make that run, and that 98 team was able to do that. So now 98 comes along, and now you enter the 2000s, And, tell us about what made things change in terms of starting to put together those 3 and 4 year, 5 year runs of league championships all in a row.
Well, I go back to that 96 team a lot. They probably, I felt like one of my most talented teams I'd had. And, I have to take as much blame for that as the kids. I was still young. You realize, even as a coach, there's so much to learn and so much to do, and learning how to figure out and deal with players and teams, and what is the best way for this team to be successful. I don't know that I did a great job doing that. I felt like I didn't reach. I just really felt like I didn't reach that team, even though they had a lot of talent. So there's never been a time if I've lost a game or we weren't as successful as we should have been that I didn't point to the myself, because there's always things I could have done as a coach to make that better. And I probably, it's probably bad timing. I probably had a good, talented team, but you still had a younger, raw coach.
Right. You had a really good team, but a coach that at that time wasn't ready for that type of team, because I can only imagine what you could do with that type of team now. You know what I mean? Like that team was big.
I'd certainly like to have it back. But
that team was big. But, Coach, that's what makes you a great coach, is the fact that you're willing to take responsibility and look back and say, they probably gave me everything they had. I didn't do a good – and you gave them everything you had. You just didn't – it takes a lot, a great coach. That's what makes great coaches great, is being able to accept your role in it, knowing that looking back, you maybe could have done some things different. So we've talked about, the 96 team, we've talked about the 90 team. We've talked about the 96 team. We've talked about the 98 team, and now we're into the 2000s. The 2000 group, that was another weird group to me, because it was a group that had some kids like Jason Knott and Craig Waits and Corey Grant and Matt Cowhall. It was like a good group of guys, but they just never really quite put it all together to be able to get over the hump for you. Tell us about that team.
Well, let's see. That would have been, 99, 97, 98, 99. Yeah.
99, 2000.
99, 2000.
Jason Knott, Craig Waits, Matty Cowhall, Corey Grant.
Yeah, and I had taken a year off before that because I'd lost my first son the year before that. So
gotcha.
I'd taken a leave of absence that year, and I'd resigned, and somebody else had taken over. And then, so that was my first year back. And they were good. I can say it was one of my favorite, because they played so hard, played good defense, had Justin Boyd then too.
Yeah, Justin Boyd. Yep.
And that crew, and we just wasn't probably. I don't know that we had a lot of basketball talent. They were athletic.
They were athletic, and they were gutsy. They were tough. All those kids were tough. Yeah.
Yeah, they were probably one of my black and blue teams, because you know what? They didn't care who came in the door. They were ready to fight.
Right. That's what I mean. They were tough. That's why I brought that team up, because they brought a different dimension.
Oh yeah, and I like their attitude. I like teams I like players that had that. They may be better than us, but you got to fight on your hands when you come in the door. So let's go. And so the bigger thing for me there was just keeping them, under control, where they could still play tough, play hard, but yet not go to the point of just go toe to toe.
Right.
But I really enjoyed that group too.
So let's talk about something that we've talked about in the past episodes this week. Talked about it with Coach Wells, and I want to give you a chance to expand on it for a couple minutes. But culture. Culture is the word that we use, as coaches. It's a mantra, so to speak, that we bring to programs. We're going to build culture, and we're going to build relationships, and those those are our ultimate goals. And if we, hopefully we win some along the way. But in building that culture, you have to get every team to understand that every practice matters, every game matters, every pregame warm-up matters, every workout matters, every possession matters, and every game matters. Let's fast forward to that 2007 group, not the state championship, but that group from when they hit high school in the ninth grade. As good as all the players were that you've coached before, and as good as and talented as some of the teams were that you've coached before, this is not a knock on any of those teams. But was that the first group that you had ever coached where every detail mattered?
In 2007?
Not the 2007 team, but the group. So when those guys got to high school, when Jay was a freshman and Corey was a freshman, that class, was that the first class that you had ever coached where you said, when they got to be freshmen, where you said, okay, I got 3 or 4 kids, 5 kids in this class, and they're like, they get it that every single detail matters?
They do. I think that there's a couple of things. You can't ever fear playing your best players regardless if they're a freshman or a senior. And I think some coaches get hung up on the fact of they can't play younger kids. But the bottom line is, if they're going to benefit your team and they're the better player, then they play. And I can tell you, I acknowledge our school for giving us as coaches the reins to do that, because some schools like to get involved and tell you that you shouldn't play this kid ahead of seniors or juniors and who know nothing about basketball.
Right.
But they know the politics of it.
Right.
So the one thing that I never felt like anybody tried to make me do, as far as from administration and from, they let us coach and they let us play who we wanted. So I never had the fear or the thought. I mean, don't get me wrong. Anytime you throw a freshman out there, they're not going to respond automatically perfect and do all the right things. But you have enough confidence to know that if they can just play long enough at that age and at that level, that they're going to make positive things happen and be an impact. So, yeah, that year, actually, there were 3 freshmen that played. Some started, some didn't, but they played. And I just knew in the long term, when you're a small school, you got up your talent when you got it. And so to have the opportunity a year, 2 or 3 later to maybe make that big run and have success. And so that was the beginning. There's so much to gain, and there's nothing that can beat experience, especially at a young age, so that when that comes back around, our juniors, they're under pressure and they're under that situation, it's nothing. They have the ability to get through it and do well. So that was a major plus,
2005, 2006, you go 22-2 and lose to Houston in the district finals. What went through your mind after that loss, and then what goes through your mind 24 hours later in terms of knowing that everyone is coming back?
I can say it now, but I wouldn't tell you then. But that was a long bus trip home. It was the worst loss as a coach that I had experienced because I thought we had the best opportunity. And I still said at the time, and of course it's hard to argue with 07 because 06, that it was one of my best all-around teams because I still had the players that played for us the next year, but I had kids that were there that they could just flat out play defense and they knew the role. And, we lost the first game of the year and we lost our last game of the year. That was our 2 losses. So we won them all in between. And
who else was on that team, Coach, that graduated that year?
Well, Brad,
okay.
Daniel Aller.
Okay, all right.
Were our seniors that we had that had played a lot for us that year. And we probably played one of the best halves we'd ever played because we were up, 12, 14 points at half. And I was in that position. I think we were playing 6 kids at the time, and we were on that college floor, and they were playing as hard as they could. And things are going well, but boy, you could just see it. They got tired and kept calling timeouts until we ran out of them to try to get them their legs back. But they ran out of gas. And at the end of the day, we still had a couple chances to win. Of course, they go down and run a play. Kid shoots a 3, and we had a kid right in his face. We were up 2 at the time, and he buries the 3. I mean, it's one of those where you saw it leave his hand, and it looked good from the moment it left his fingertips, and it was straight in.
As soon as it left his hands, you sat down in your seat because you knew at that point, like, the basketball gods aren't with me.
They weren't with us, and that was tough because in my mind, we just got back to the district, and it's so hard to get there. And it was probably the best opportunity we had to win it because, Georgetown had never won a district ever.
Mm-hmm.
That was another huge hurdle.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of our hurdles we wanted to get over was, man, somebody's got to break the ice and do that. And sure enough, we did. So there we were again.
So
knocking on the door and got beat by a lass at worse by Houston, who beat us at 90 in the district. So it was our chance to kind of come back at it and do it, and we didn't do it. So that was a tough bus ride home. I remember just contemplating, man, what else do you do, and do I want to continue to do it?
Right.
I always do that as a coach at the end of the year, but man, coming off a loss like that, it was hard not to say, you know what, I've done all I could do, and that's it. But I knew we had great talent coming back, but what you also know is, even though, like you said before, you had a great year and you got a lot of kids coming back, but it just doesn't always that you can get back there again. It's not that easy. It's not like, oh, well, we'll get this far again. It's just not that way. But anyways,
they say embrace it. And look, my Uncle Dean always used to say, every time we go to a sectional and every time we go to a district and when we went to the regionals, he'd always say, look around the gym, soak it up. Look where your mom's sitting. Look where the mom and dad are sitting. Look where, because you may not ever get an opportunity. The next time you come in here, it might be as a spectator, and you might remember those same seats, but you may not be on the floor this time. And so now you lose that game to Houston. Let's fast forward to the end of the school year. And I'll tell you a funny story before you get started, but I was talking to Jay earlier in the week, and I said, Jay, when did you realize that you could win a state championship? Like, when did you realize that you might be good enough? And he said, as interesting as this may sound, and as crazy as it may sound, my little brother told me. I was focused on winning the district. And we played somebody over the summer, and we had a pretty good team, and Coach had got us a pretty good summer schedule, and we beat somebody that was pretty good. And Jay comes up to me and says, hey, I think we can win the state championship. Jess came up to Jay and was like, hey, I think we can win the state championship. And Jay was like, man, I'm just trying to win a district, but all right. So he said that was the day that he realized that there may be more to it, that they may be, because when you're part of a group, you really don't know how special you are when you're in that moment. Like when you're playing, when you're coaching that 2007 group, you don't know how special they really are when you're in that moment, because your job at that moment is not to know how good they are or not to know how special they are, to make them better, And so when Jess comes along, he knows how special they are because he wasn't with them the year before. And so he thinks he's came straight out of middle school into a state championship team. And in June, he's the only one that was right. So what was your thought process like going through that summer and preseason before 2007?
Well, I did, and purposely, probably for those last 2 years, we probably had an extremely tough summer schedule because I wanted to push our kids. They needed that. When you have kids of talent, you got to find talent for them, somebody to challenge them, and somebody to, kind of bring them back to earth sometimes, because not that you want them to get beat, but you want them to not to play their butt off and work hard to get wins. And so that whole summer, they probably were guessing how good they were because we didn't go and just beat everybody, but we had moments where we played really well and we beat some really good teams. And so I'm sure they were still questioning the fact, were they going to be as good? Now, of course, if you ask them today, they'll tell you, well, yeah, we were going to be better than last year's team. But you know how that goes. It's gotten a lot bigger and better since. But nonetheless, and you kind of wanted that to be there going into the fall. So they know they're going to have to work hard to get back where we would have an opportunity to win a district championship.
So the summer's over. Through the summer, you played St. X and you played some of the Princetons and bigger schools in the city. You're competitive. Don't win them all, but you're competitive. Just Chadwell, the 13-year-old kid, is the only person that thinks you can win a state championship at this point. Everybody else is playing for a district championship. They're satisfied to get that point because Georgetown's never won one before at this point. And the season tips off. And once the season tips off, I don't remember if it was the first game or Mark Gray just signed in, Coach. Mark Gray said, we played the two teams in Kentucky that played for this title that year. So played some Kentucky teams as well, Mark says.
Oh, yeah. I think we were going down to Transy. They have
team camp. Yeah, they have a really good Don Lane and Brian Lane, the team camp. Yeah, I used to work that camp. So now the season tips off, first or second game of the year. Ball gets thrown up. You're at my alma mater at Ripley. Ripley, too, had a very, very, very good basketball team that year. Rex Woodward, Corey Hinchin, Aaron Brooks, Austin Fulton, Derek Jolly, John Manier, TJ Huff. They were deep. Corey Hinchin was a really good player. They had 8 or 9 kids that could play. I was at the game sitting up in the mezzanine, and Ripley had you on the ropes.
They had us on the ropes all night. It's one of those things. At the beginning of the year, everybody's undefeated, so everybody's got high hopes. Ripley had a great team, and we're having to go into that place. And, at least at that time, if everybody knew that both teams were good, then everybody in the county was coming to watch. So it was a packed house. It was crazy at night. So here we go. We had 4 guys going back out that had played last year and had some experience, and then we have this freshman who, says we're going to win a state championship, and all of a sudden his eyes are as big as saucers, and we're just worried about him not peeing down his leg the first quarter.
Right.
Nonetheless, he did. Yes, the only game in his career he didn't score.
Wow.
It was his first varsity game ever. So
wow.
I understand because, man, there was just, that's high pressure. And
you go from –
fortunately, our seniors took over and got us down the stretch. But, yeah, we basically trailed most of the game. So
is Jay the all-time leading scorer at Georgetown, or has he been passed? Or not Jay, but Jess.
Jess has